Are you ready to become a change maker? Our 48-week postgraduate program in public policy or the PGP may be just the thing for you. This hybrid program is designed to give you both the theoretical foundation and hands-on experience needed to excel in policy making. With a mix of expert-led webinars, in-person workshops, and policy simulation exercises, you'll gain real-world skills along with personalized mentorship. Through our policy programs, we connect good people to good ideas and good networks. Apply now at the link in the description to make an impact.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, folks. I'm Sowmya Prabhakar, COO at the Takshashila Institution. And in this ATP episode, we're going to talk about sci-fi. You're right. It's not sci-fi, but sci-fi that we're going to discuss about. And pleasure to have with me my colleague Ashwin Prasad, who's a research analyst working with the high-tech geopolitics program here. And he monitors the evolution of India as a space power by undertaking policy research on the commercial, legal, and strategic aspects of outer space. How cool is that? And from an Indian national interest perspective, of course. So welcome, Ashwin, to this episode.
Thank you, Soumya. I'm very glad to be here.
Okay. Ashwin, as much as satellite internet sounds cool and very futuristic, I'm more keen on understanding from you the behavioral economics perspective of it. Okay, so we'll begin with that and we'll get to a little bit of a technical side of it in the mid of the conversation. I hope you're okay with that.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So if we had to fully adopt, say, a satellite internet kind of tech, then would it change social norms and digital behavior? And to be a little more clear on that, like given that there's going to be an uninterrupted access to the internet, even in remote areas maybe, and given the urban migration of sorts that will probably reduce, I'm thinking with this, and the digital divide also will kind of close to some extent. So would this high speed, satellite internet always like lead to kind of other sorts of behaviors which could end up in digital addiction or, have a more siloed population?
Well, very interesting question, Soumya. And just as it happens, though I have thought about this and read about this for so long, I just realized that I haven't thought about the social impact explicitly yet. But I still have some thoughts that occur to me as I hear your question. Yes, I definitely think behaviors will change. So the first calculation that will go through people's minds is that they are moving to the city for work and for the access to a workplace. And if they can work remotely, and if they can work remotely from their villages, which actually lack the infrastructure for reliable internet throughout the day, then they will make the calculation that it's instead of moving and paying for rents and cost of living in cities, instead they can just stay home and continue to work and continue to have the same lifestyle and the place of living that they have had. And so this is definitely very likely that large sections of the population will do this, especially in India. And it will have a lot of social impact as such, because already a lot of the social norms and behaviors get changed when there is an urban migration, right? Yeah. And now when you don't have that, and when you continue living as you are, then that's going to have a different kind of an impact. And some of them will be very positive, because there will be large sections of the rural population or people in the remote areas will get access to internet, and they can use that for their own benefit in learning and adopt and like expanding their thinking, and it will give them a chance to escape out of their own geographical constraints.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it can also be the case that there is a lack of education in some places, and without digital literacy, without really having the educational context that allows you to take advantage of the internet for the positive effects, there might be more addiction, there might be more cases of like unhealthy use and unhealthy access of the internet, which can have its own negative effect. So I definitely think that this is something we should all be thinking about, more investigating and preparing for, because satellite internet is a reality now, and it's going to become more and more prevalent in the coming years. So
Yeah.
the society should be ready for that.
Okay. No, my interest in the implications that it would have on people is also because my core function is to do with people. So I'm always curious about how this will pan out. But I'm also looking at the promise it holds, and how we can probably leverage it for the best. So if we had to kind of have some sort of similar example, for me close to satellite internet is something that the real estate game would look like, right? I'm going to have a lot of conversation, Ashwin, with you, trying to match it with what happens here right now in an urban space with physical access to internet, right? It could be VPNs, or it could be Wi-Fi connection. So if we had to regulate the sky itself, while multiple countries are looking at beaming the internet. Now, if they're going to target, say, the same population, whose rules would actually apply to it?
Typically, that though the country of origin of the satellite internet technology would maybe be from a single country, the company would have to be regulatorily compliant with the laws and the rules of the country that it is providing its services in. So, suppose Starlink is now trying to come and provide its services to India. Then, before it gets the regulatory approvals, it will have to say that it will follow all the laws and rules of the telecom policy and other laws that India has, and Starlink will have to be compliant in that. So this will hold for every other country that it provides a service in. And if they don't do it, suppose they ignore it, then the Indian government can always say, we're going to revoke your authorization to operate in India, and you can no longer do so. But I also have to highlight that while countries can definitely use this power, it's very little is stopping these satellite internet companies from providing the services wherever they want, because by nature it is a very borderless technology, right? It is somewhere
Yeah.
up in the sky, we can't even see it, and most often we don't even know where it is being used.
Yeah.
And so there have already been so many cases of, let's say, Starlink terminals, so the devices that you need to access Starlink internet, being smuggled across borders to countries like, so for instance, Myanmar already has a lot of users using satellite internet, and for a long time it's not authorized there at all.
Oh,
And the
okay.
same thing with India. I mean, in India, in Manipur, they seized some satellite internet terminals during a raid, and
Okay.
they, with arms and all of that, they found a Starlink device there. So it's still it's a huge regulatory challenge, that how we can control and regulate this.
Okay, interesting. So, given the use case of, say, a Manipur and Myanmar itself, do you think that, say, an internet censorship of sorts, right, will it still, like, they would probably then get access to unrestricted satellite internet, then, right? If a country has internet censorship, and
Yeah.
then you have an unrestricted satellite internet somewhere surrounding it, there's a high possibility, because of the porous nature of it, that it could seep in.
Yeah, and if these companies, if let's again taking the example of Starlink, if Starlink gets authorizations in India and it starts operating in India, then it would also follow all of the rules that it has to follow in India, which would include the sites that it has to block within
Okay.
the Indian for the Indian users. and then they would do it. They would agree to do it. There will also be mechanisms to do it from the ground. So some ground stations in India will implement these rules, and so it will operate the same way our regular internet operates.
All
But
right.
this is only when there is regulation happening. So suppose there is no regulation happening, then no rules will apply, and I mean you
Yeah.
would have uncensored, unblocked internet to all the users who are using it without the government even knowing. But
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. That's the geopolitics view as well, right? But what if we had to, like, what's like the dark web equivalent of like the maybe a dark sky policy, like say for regulating light pollution, right? In the night sky, we all have experienced that, the sky is beautiful when you go to a very dense green, non-populated, very few urban lights in the vicinity, that you can spot a lot in the sky, and there's some sort of delight in seeing that kind of a sky. So would there be some regulation in like the orbital data pollution of sorts?
Yeah, I mean, this is actually a serious problem on many counts. On one, the lot of frequency spectrums being used by these satellites itself, and so there is actually a lot more activity happening from there.
Okay.
And also, the first thing we have to realize is that these things are operating on an unimaginable scale. For instance,
Mm.
Starlink alone has 8,000 satellites in the lower Earth orbit right now,
Mm.
and they are saying they're going to have more than 40 or even 50,000 satellites
Whoa.
when they're
Okay.
finally done. That
Mm-hmm.
is a massive number,
Mm.
and when that finally does happen, and we are seeing the effects of this already, right? I mean,
Mm.
you mentioned light pollution. There is actually instances of light pollution already happening. For example, a lot of astronomers and
Mm.
astronomy enthusiasts are complaining about this effect, because you might have seen these pictures of a series of like star-like objects in the sky
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
single line. Those are actually Starlink satellites, and so because there are so many of these, and
Okay.
they are just big chunks of metal with solar panels and a lot of equipment,
Hmm.
they are
Hmm.
reflecting a lot of the light from the sky back to the earth, and so they are actually impacting astronomy in a negative way. We are able to observe faraway stars and universe in a less
Yeah.
optimized way because of this, and so that effect is already there. It is
Hmm.
also taking up a lot of frequency resources, because a good way to think about frequency resources is that they are highways from the sky to
Mm-hmm.
the surface of the earth,
Okay.
right? And so these highways are limited, right?
Hmm.
We don't have too many highways to actually go
Hmm.
and use our like whatever purposes we have. We don't actually have there is a constraint here right now. The constraint is not being felt because the activity in space is still reasonably low, but
Hmm.
as this increases to 50,000 satellites by Starlink alone, and you have more players like Amazon Kuiper or
Hmm.
OneWeb having its own constellations being extremely active and growing, then
Right.
you're going to feel the constraints of this, and then you might also have cases of one country having more in and another country getting less because of that, and then that's going to come with its own competition and implications. So and pollution is definitely, like you said, light pollution is already happening, and another case of pollution that is happening is these satellites are built to last for around 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of the initial satellites being built
Yeah.
more than 5 years ago are already at their end of life, and when they reach end of life, they just fall back into the sky
Hmm.
and they burn up in the atmosphere. But
Okay.
as
Okay.
they do this, there is a bit of pollution happening at the uh,
Mm-hmm.
ozone layer and at various parts of the atmosphere because of that. And again, when this starts happening at scale, when we have 50,000 satellites, maybe we'll have 100 or even 500 satellites burning up every day.
Mm-hmm.
And how much of a pollution risk is that? We don't
Right.
know yet. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of questions to keep an eye on.
Yeah, yeah, like how to clear the debris itself, right? I mean, that might be a new thing that people should start thinking about already.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if there is some collisions there and two of these satellites collide, because there will be so many of them, they
Yeah.
will create debris, and that will negatively impact every other satellite on in the orbit. And this will happen more and more as we increase the activity there more and more. So, yeah.
Right. Okay. So, to get on to a new tangent of just thinking about how the markets and the competition here looks like,
Okay.
you already mentioned earlier on that there are probably very few players who are dominating this low orbit satellite thing, right? And would they become, I mean, now there is no regulation as well in place. So, could it also lead to like a truly global monopoly? They'll be like the first few guys to, monopolize the whole thing?
Yeah, this risk is definitely there
Hmm.
because this technology is fundamentally global. So you start launching and you have enough satellites there, it can have global coverage.
Hmm.
And the first few constellations of these satellites, which will provide good service,
Hmm.
will capture a lot of the market.
Hmm.
And newer players will find a smaller and a smaller share of
Hmm.
the market to actually take advantage of.
Hmm.
And this has already become a problem with Starlink. Starlink
Hmm.
has the advantage of having the most satellites already in the sky,
Hmm.
and they have the advantage of launch also. So the way this technology works is that many things need to come together and be put together to make this possible. And
Right.
so Starlink has it's owned by the larger SpaceX corporation, which has very advanced rocket technology in their hands.
Hmm.
And because this advanced rocket technology involves reusable rockets, so they have and they're the only ones to operate reusable rockets in the world at the scale that they're doing right now. So
Hmm.
they actually essentially send rockets, and
Hmm.
the rockets come back and land,
Oh,
and they can
okay.
reuse these, they refuel them, do some basic maintenance, and reuse them again.
Hmm.
So as opposed to a lot of satellites, including ISRO's rockets, including ISRO's rockets, which just burn up. It's a one-way trip for them. They go and they just burn up.
Hmm. Hmm.
And because of this reusability, the cost of launching satellites for Starlink is extremely low, which is how they have been able to, launch
Hmm.
very frequently and at a very high number. And they already have this huge lead over the rest of the competition. So as of now, as of today, Starlink is already a global monopoly when it comes to satellite internet.
Hmm.
Will that change as others come in? Yes, to an extent. And if there is innovation, and if they can break through some of Starlink's market share and offer better services in some way, then that will definitely happen. But the risk is still there,
Hmm.
because the first one to get there always has an advantage. And
Yeah.
Starlink is operational in over more than 100 countries already, and
Hmm. Hmm.
that monopolization risk is there, which is why I think it is important for India also to do something here and try and get incentivize Indian companies and Indian players to build constellation
Yeah.
of their own, just so that we don't lag behind
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
this truly starts to become a race that matters.
Yeah, interesting that some, of course, fade out there and some have the ability, like a Starlink, getting it back, and the cost would look different. So, how does the satellite insurance domain look like, Ashwin? So, given that, like an auto insurance kind of thing, right, for the
Yeah.
skies,
Yeah.
so how would that market look like?
So the space insurance market is very different compared to the insurances that we are familiar with, because number one, the scales are so big,
Hmm.
the amount spent and what is at stake is so high that
Hmm.
only a few insurers in the world can even provide insurance for satellite internet kind of systems.
Hmm.
And as an effect, the insurance premiums are also very high. So
Hmm.
usually what happens is, if somebody wants to insure a satellite
Hmm.
or a launch, they approach a provider, they pay a certain premium, and if something goes wrong based on the terms of the insurance, they get to recuperate some of that losses.
Yeah.
But
Hmm. Hmm.
what is peculiar is Starlink has so many satellites, and they're launching so many satellites more and more frequently that it's in a way it doesn't make economical sense for them to buy insurance for every one of those satellites and pay those premiums, because it is better that they don't buy insurance and something goes wrong and maybe a satellite malfunctions of it. And many satellites have malfunctioned already. And when that happens, they just absorb those losses on their own, because they're thinking of, like maybe 10 satellites in 8,000. Which is different from, let's say, another satellite, which is a single satellite being launched after many, many years of research and manufacturing and all of that. So basically, SpaceX and Starlink have put Starlink satellites on a factory chain, and they're being manufactured very rapidly, one after the other, and they're making so many of them that even if one of them fails or one of them goes wrong, they're just saying, okay, it's okay, we'll we have enough of others that are working, that we are accepting these margins as losses. And that's essentially what is happening. So there is because the scale of the number of satellites that satellite internet, especially satellite internet mega constellations, need, the insurance is being looked at differently here.
Okay. Interesting. And so I was just watching Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean, and I'm just going to go on a completely different tangent to ask you if there at all, do you think there'll be a telecom pirate of sorts, and it'll lead into, say, a black market satellites who will provide, like, say, unrestricted internet access to maybe censored countries? And will there be a rebel group that will kind of bypass all this global regulations that could come up?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely a possibility you can imagine, just because it's so hard to know who is using Starlink when they're not supposed to. Because all you need is the terminal. And
Right.
once you get that device, that terminal, it is essentially an antenna and a Wi-Fi router that we have in our house built into a single device in the system. And it can communicate with satellites, and you will have Wi-Fi wherever you want. And as long as you have some power supply. And that's extremely powerful as technology, and extremely hard to regulate, because who knows where it is being used and when, right? For example, a lot of internet shutdowns, right? Like there has been a civil war in Sudan in the last months, and there has been a large scale, internet. Internet has been down for a long time, and I was reading that a lot of these Sudanese people are actually getting Starlink devices, smuggling them from somewhere,
Oh.
and setting up internet cafes on their own. And because Starlink is, I mean, as it is definitely much more affordable than what satellite internet used to cost in the older days, but it is still expensive. I mean, to get a single satellite Starlink device, you need to pay around $500, and it comes with a monthly costs of $50 to $100, and it is still not a very affordable technology for a lot of people. But how the Sudanese are like overcoming this is that somebody is buying it, and they're literally setting up internet cafes of their own. And a lot of people are coming in, accessing the internet whenever they want, and that's become a business of its own. And this is definitely a case of the satellite internet being offered against government's wishes or against any regulatory approval at all, and it being and so what happens is, can Starlink find out that these devices are being used in a place where there is no authorization, and can they stop it? Yes. But will they stop it? Why should they? Right? Because for them, as far as they are concerned, they have sold their device, and they have already that whoever is using it have paid for the monthly thing.
Right.
And they can always just claim plausible deniability, that this was sold in this and this country, and the payment was from this and this country. So they thought it was legal, but and they're just going to just allow it, because they do have a GPS module, and they can track where it is being used from. But they have every incentive to just let users use it illegally. because it is more business. So, and in maybe in some ways it is also a good thing, because there might be some repressive regimes and civil rights are being curtailed by denying access to internet, and then Starlink can actually be a medium for those people to continue having their voices. But it's also the case that it can be used for illicit activities, it can be used against law, and it can be used for and it's very easy for this technology to go underground.
Yeah.
And maybe some governments will figure out ways to really control it and all of that, but some cases of illicit use here and there can never be actually controlled, and this is likely going to continue being a problem for a long time. And a good way to think about this is that it's going to democratize internet in the same way that we have access to water or all of that. So we never, like, you can't really, at some point I think we are just going to stop trying to control access to internet.
Yeah. And yeah, of course, this is more in the initial phase. So it might look like, oh, even if Starlink has given it out, it's more like a business, it's a transaction, right? It's not necessarily looking at the implications of geopolitics angle to it. But since we have talked about black market, does this also mean that, what if there are countries which ban satellite internet totally? Like, say, I don't know if I can't really imagine, but I'm just kind of thinking they could block the signals from satellites flying above its airspace kind of territory, right? And like a sky VPNs, which people bounce off signals off the different orbits. Is that a possibility? Could it
So
emerge?
the thing with this older satellite internet technologies have existed, but they used to do this with fewer satellites. Okay, so they would like use a few, even like in the count of maybe 5 to 15 satellites, and they would be providing internet, which it was of lower quality, but that's how it has traditionally been used. But the new trend here is to use satellites that are closer to Earth. So as opposed to, let's say, 35,782 kilometers, these satellites are at around 500 kilometers. So you can imagine the difference. And to give you an example, there is an older system of satellite internet. It's called the Global Express series. It was initially owned by a company named Inmarsat, but now it's owned by Viasat, and again a satellite internet company. And these satellites, with just 3 satellites at around 35,786 kilometers from the Earth's surface, they could provide coverage to almost the whole of Earth's surface, except maybe the polar regions or something. They could provide services everywhere. That's how far off they were, and that's how much more they could cover. But now you have Starlink providing the same internet services with it's faster and it's of a better quality, but it is being provided from a distance of just 550 kilometers from the Earth's surface. So the effect of this is that while GX satellites can cover entire continents, a Starlink satellite can only cover a single city at the most. Average, as much as an Indian metropolitan city, around 500 square kilometers of area. So if you were to block if governments had to find a way to block Starlink, then they would have to find a way to block Starlink every 500 kilometers, because there would be so many satellites zooming past the sky.
Right.
And so you can set up some jamming technologies for a certain place or a certain area, but how much state capacity would it take to actually block this across the country? It's very hard. And these satellites are moving very fast. They're moving at 27,000 kilometers per hour, more than that. So if you could actually see a Starlink satellite in the sky, you could see it on one horizon, and it would just take less than 4 minutes for it to just fly all across and reach the other horizon and disappear from your point of view. And this constantly happens, and there are so many satellites. So it is definitely a challenge to completely cut access off using technology by the governments. But I'm sure, there are already reports of Russians jamming satellite internet in the Russia-Ukraine war to prevent Ukrainians from using Starlink. So there are some cases that it can be done, but they will be specialized and local.
Okay, but that's interesting, Ashwin. Can this be perceived as an act of war itself? Because the cyber warfare itself, right? Hacking like a fiber optic cable, or could it lead to like sabotaging satellites in space and that kind of a scenario?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can visualize a scenario very easily where two
Hmm.
countries are on the verge of war or are at war,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? So,
Hmm.
and if these countries, if they want to inflict some damage or inconvenience to their enemy,
Hmm.
bombing a city is going to achieve this, but it is also going to increase the repercussions of that move, right? Uh, there will be huge loss of life. There will be a lot of criticism from the rest of the world
Hmm.
and all of that. But
Hmm.
at the same time, just shooting down a satellite is very easy.
Hmm.
I mean, you are still causing inconvenience, but you're still taking out some of the communication capability. But it is a single satellite,
Hmm.
and there is no loss of life. There is nothing happening, and
Okay. Hmm.
it's also the threshold for targeting satellites is very low. And
Hmm.
I can, if there are wars large enough, I can definitely see this happening.
Hmm.
And if you think about it, and Starlink satellites themselves are like weapons because
Hmm.
there are 8,000 of them, and
Yeah.
there is one Starlink satellite near some other satellite at a given point of time everywhere. I am sure that if they want, Starlink could just direct their satellites and ram into an enemy satellite if there was such a scenario. And
Hmm.
that could also they could also function as, and they are, like I said, they're traveling at 27,000 kilometers per hour.
Hmm.
They are missiles in their own right.
Hmm. Hmm.
But whether this happens or not will be another matter to see. And
Hmm.
also with satellite internet mega constellations, the thing is, even if you take out 110 or even 50 satellites, the
Hmm.
service will continue because the other satellites will just make up for this and they will work a little harder. There will be slight decrease in the speed of the internet you get, but you'll still have coverage.
Hmm.
So even if there is a targeting of these assets, then they will have to target them on a very wide scale. And in the process, if they're actually destroying them and blowing them up, then it will create debris again. And then that debris can threaten everybody in the orbit, including the country that has done it, plus other countries which they are friendly to. So,
Hmm.
it's a very, very complex issue to resolve.
Right. Okay, now to kind of expand this further, say the rise of, say, space sovereignty, right, for internet regulation itself. Now, what if Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos and other space entrepreneurs kind of decide maybe to run their own internet country from the orbit? Then how would like the sovereignty entity, like beyond the national laws itself, right? How would that play out?
I mean, in the short term, there are ways to effectively control this because everything we do is coming from the earth, right? So, though they are able to set up these satellites and these satellites are essentially
Mm,
working on their own and they can create an internet in the sky completely independent of ground assets in the coming future, they are still launching the rockets off some spaceport on the ground. They are still building these satellites somewhere in some country. They're still making the rockets in some country, and the people are from these places. So as long as, let's say, if just for the sake of illustrating this,
mm,
suppose Starlink goes rogue,
mm,
and but then the US government can simply control its facilities, its assets, its people, and its processes on the ground,
mm,
which will and hold, like, that can itself hold Starlink and halt all of its plans, and then they have an imperative to abide by the government's
mm,
orders. So
mm,
as long as the and this holds true for all space technology, that as long as you are dependent on the ground, you're dependent on the entity that controls the ground, which is the states,
mm, mm, mm,
until the like far-flung sci-fi future where we are starting to extract resources from space itself, not from the earth,
mm,
and we are independently able to exist without any resources from earth. We are
mm,
bound by the law, order, and priorities and of the states that rule the earth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting, because I'm just thinking the time we say time off and go on vacation, right? Most of
Yeah.
the times we end up choosing places, right, Ashwin, which is like limited internet access. You want to be in a green space, a jungle, or a desert, or maybe sometimes at a beach side, right, where
Yeah.
it's slightly more secluded. Now we are going to reach a point where probably, universal Wi-Fi kind of access will be there. So irrespective of which remote location we choose to holiday, we'll still probably end up being connected, right? And you
That's
could live
true.
stream and still do your routine.
Yes, there is no escape from work, even if you take a vacation, because in the near future, your office might
Yeah.
provide a office laptop and satellite internet terminal, so you are always connected. But yeah, that's definitely going to become the reality. Internet is going to become as pervasive as air and water and roads and electricity and things like that.
Hmm. But it might also get tricky, right? This whole working contract itself. I'm just looking at it more from human resources angle as well. Now, say there will be, say, a cloud nomads kind of a thing emerging where, irrespective of you being in, say, remote islands or international waters, because of satellite internet, you stay connected. So then maybe people will get taxed based on IP addresses they use, and not necessarily for the physical location and infrastructure we use. Like, say, in Bangalore, our biggest grouse has been, okay, I'm paying taxes, I'm being such a good citizen, but what about our infrastructure, right? I mean, getting to office becomes difficult. So, how will these things play out is what I was
Wow,
like.
that's a very fascinating thought, and that's absolutely true. That we'll have fewer and fewer reasons. I mean, to stay rooted in one place.
Mm, mm,
And I mean, today infrastructure is definitely one of them. But if that is also like if you are taking, you're doing a -1 on the
mm,
list of things that you have to stay rooted for, and the -1 is the Wi-Fi and the internet access itself, then yeah,
mm,
then definitely you're like, you can. And this is actually a reality in some way, because I have read that 17% of Starlink's customers
mm,
are on the move always. So they are people like truck drivers, RV owners who are digital
mm,
nomads. They just
mm,
roam around, park their vehicle, and work from out of some place, and they sleep in the middle of the Grand Canyon and things like that.
mm, mm,
So
mm.
this is already actually happening, and if this increases, then
Mm.
yeah, I mean, states governments have to take notice, and they are going to think about how
Yeah,
to think about the revenues and taxation, and it's going to
yeah.
change things. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. A COVID pandemic allowed us to think that, okay, work from home option, or even considering that, you can have the flexibility of few days. It allowed people to take that step, right? That big leap of, it can be done remotely. So this is going to the next orbit totally. So is there also, like, just thinking aloud, an AI only internet provider that will emerge maybe at some point in space, who will set its own access rules and become like this Skynet of sorts?
Yeah, I mean, the satellites have to get more and more autonomous if they're going to operate on this scale, right? Because right now, I mean, most of, not all, but some of the satellites for satellite internet in the sky talk to each other,
Hmm.
and they
Hmm.
have to be interconnected, and they pass data on, and all of these are
Hmm.
defined by software. And a way to make this more optimized, more efficient, is to make it more autonomous and let it take decisions on its own, which can reduce the human input and increase efficiency.
Hmm.
So we will see that these things becoming smarter and more independent on their own. And the way to finally, when that does happen, who knows, maybe we'll have a very benevolent uh, Skynet system that is very good at giving us internet access in a very efficient way with
Hmm.
least
Hmm.
resources and all of that. But
Hmm.
it will be a spectacle to see
Yeah.
these systems on these scales, on such unimaginable scales, operating autonomously and doing all of this.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's very fascinating for me as well. Just to, I mean, as much as it sounds fun and at times it's also unsettling in a way, right? Like I can't imagine it enough and think like how this could pan out. But Ashwin, I think this whole conversation from dwelling into, say, a digital behavior element to how this economic impact would look like, or even the security and the global governance around it, right? I think it opens up to a larger conversation of thinking how the future could really look like. I mean, it's hard to imagine, but it's fun as well at the same time. So I'm glad you're working on these niche areas which are so exciting. And thanks for being on this podcast. If there are any closing thoughts from you, Ashwin, happy to have that.
I had a lot of fun discussing these ideas, Soumya. They were, and I'm sure our listeners will as well. And yeah, I mean, like the rate at which things are changing are, we could have never seen this coming. 10 years ago, there was no machine learning and AI, but now look where we are. Like it has evolved so quickly. And
Yes, yes.
similarly, like until a few years ago, there was no like there was different forms of satellite internet, but individual people, like everyday customers accessing Wi-Fi from their homes which come from satellites, was a very novel concept. But now that is also becoming very, very commonplace. There are millions of people using this. So the rate at which society is evolving thanks to technology is it keeps getting faster and faster. And so never a boring day when you're
Yes.
trying to read up and think and solve for the governance, regulation, and all the issues that comes with this. But it's definitely something that we should always watch out for.
Yeah, yeah, and look forward to as well. So thanks, Ashwin. And by the way, so for people listening to this podcast, both Ashwin and I are alum of Takshashila. We've finished the GCPP course at different points and come on board as part of the core team as well. So people who would like to sign up for our graduate program or even the PGP offering that we have, it's a good time to sign up. The applications are open. So look forward to see you all in the upcoming cohort. Thanks, Ashwin. Thanks for your time. It was a
Thanks, Samya.
discussion. Okay. Take care then. Bye.
Bye bye.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @Takshashila INST or our website takshashila.org.in.